How about if I just start at the beginning? You could be honest.
Because you know what? They have the sweat equity that went into that memory that they're making with their friends and family. And that's what's important with us. And that's what the I Am Real world's about.
Well, that's a great question. You know, one of the best things about a spring food plot is you get a second chance if it fails.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins. Brought to you by buyafarm.com, your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. By tapping into Don's years of experience, dedication, and commitment, Chasing Giants focuses on the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails. Now, here is Don and co-host Terry Peer.
Well, welcome everybody to episode 2 of Chasing Giants with Don Higgins, brought to you by buyafarm.com. I'm Terry Peer, and I am sitting in Don Higgins' living room. How you doing, Don?
Great, Terry. Good to be at it again.
Yeah, it seems only fitting that we're sitting here in your living room, and I'm literally looking up at two 200-inch whitetails. It's pretty amazing, pretty humbling.
Well, I'm only allowed 2 in the living room, and you know which 2 they are.
Yeah.
The 200s that I've shot, so I lay here and look at them a lot. I'll be in here to watch TV, but I end up staring at those bucks, so my focus never changes.
Well, before we get started, I think from both of us want to really thank everyone for the positive feedback of the first episode that we put out. I was a little overwhelmed at the amount of people that reached out to us and was excited about this venture that we were doing and talking about how they were looking forward to it.
Yeah, I never heard a single negative comment. I was kind of shocked at how many downloads and the fact that you was so quickly able to get this podcast on all these different platforms. So, the first podcast, it was kind of limited on where people could listen to it, but it's really expanded now, and I think anyone with a cell phone can either get it on an Android or an iPhone. So you've done some great work getting it out there.
Yeah, it's we had to make a decision when we were going to publish the first episode whether we were going to wait and have all of those maps to iHeartRadio and to Apple Podcasts and such. But we went ahead and published it just because we knew that the social media following that we had was going to drive a lot to the hosting site, and it wasn't long, but a lot of that is due to how many downloads we had, how quickly everything got mapped. So thanks to everybody for the feedback. We've started getting a lot of questions submitted in the podcast. So Don and I were actually talking this week while I was in town, and we're going to make a new Chasing Giants t-shirt. And if you go to HigginsOutdoors.com and submit a question and we use it on air, we're going to send you one of those free Chasing Giants t-shirts.
Yeah, I was kind of overwhelmed. I thought we'd have a hard time getting questions out of people, but we've actually got more questions already than we can use on this podcast. Now, if you've submitted one and we don't use it this week, don't give up. That doesn't mean we're not ever going to use it. We're just filing those away, and we're going to answer as many as we can. That will be towards the end of each episode. We're going to have the question and answer session where we answer people's questions. So later on in this podcast, we'll get to some of those.
And I think the reason we want to do this is a very important part of the show for us, is we want this to be an outlet of information that everybody can use or get advice on for their property. We talked about last week that no 2 properties are the same, no 2 opportunities are the same. So taking bits and pieces of what your situation is and what we're dealing with, whether I'm in Kentucky or Don's in Illinois, it's something that we can all truly get something out of and accomplish our goals. So the best thing anyone can do for us right now is when you download the podcast, subscribe to it, and rank it for us. That helps other people find us quicker. So let's just jump into it, Don. Why don't we everybody was kind of shocked at the goals that you set out for yourself for 2019. You're stepping out on a limb and saying 3 Booners from 3 different properties in 3 different phases of the hunting season, and knowing that it's going to be really tough. It might take you a while to accomplish this, but that's pretty lofty goals.
Yeah, and it's a goal not just for 2019, because there's a very good chance I will not accomplish that this year. But eventually I want to accomplish that goal. And, you know, from the time I started deer hunting, my goals, I was always goal-oriented. And I would set lofty goals that seemed almost unattainable at times. And I would work, most of the time it took years to achieve a particular goal, and then I would raise the bar again and spend years trying to make the next level. So this is kind of the ultimate. And, you know, the reason that I threw this particular goal out there is there's a lot of people that have a misunderstanding about me. They've read my articles and such, and they think that I kill all these big bucks on one well-manicured property, and I have countless acres of leased ground and ground that I own that is managed strictly for big deer. The truth of the matter is I've got a 120-acre farm that I do manage strictly for whitetails, in particular big bucks. I like to get them up to about 6 years old before I harvest them. I've got a handful of lease properties, but Terry, as you know, we toured some of those properties checking cameras a couple of days ago, and these are not big properties. A lot of these properties are so small they've got one tree stand on them. But it's just places that I don't want to get stepped on. When I go to all the work of scouting a property and maybe planting a plot, hanging my stands, one hunter coming in can actually ruin that setup. And I'd just as soon slip the farmer a few $100s and keep that little spot to myself. It works great for me and the farmer. And there's actually a question that we're going to answer later in this podcast that kind of relates to this. But, you know, I want this goal of shooting 3 Booners on 3 different properties in 3 different phases of the season. It takes a well-rounded deer hunter to do that. There's a lot of guys that are killing giant bucks year after year, but they're doing it from the same property. And it's one thing to be, you know, to figure out hunting mature bucks, and it's something else to figure out a particular property. And once you figure out a particular property, you should be able to kill the biggest buck there every single year, year after year. But to go on multiple properties and do it during different times of the season is I think, the ultimate goal. And I've even spent some time in the past week on public ground. I scouted 4 different tracts of public ground. I want to kill a Booner on public ground one of these days, but, you know, I'm not going to lower my goals and shoot, you know, a 3-year-old just because he's on public ground. Whatever I'm hunting, wherever I'm hunting, it's always going to be the bigger bucks. I want them to be over 170. You know, occasionally you'll get an older buck that is not. Actually, most of the time they don't make that. So I'm looking for the rarest of the rare, and I'm willing to eat plenty of tags and end the season without a buck if that's what it takes. But that is a lofty goal that I hope to achieve one of these days.
Well, the funny thing is, a guy that I work with listened to the podcast, and he said, you know, most guys that would even try to attain that goal would never tell anybody that was their goal up front. They would just wait till they did it, however long it took them to do it, and say, oh, look at me, I did this. And you're coming at it from a different approach, because this podcast, you're saying, I'm laying out this goal, and I'm taking all the listeners along the way to see how I can do it. And I think that's the difference. You're truly wanting to go at this from an educational standpoint, not oh, look at me and what I'm doing here. This is something for everybody to learn on their piece of property.
Yeah, you know, I truly believe that what I'm doing, anyone else could do. You know, God didn't make me any better than he made anyone else. I say all the time in my seminars, I'm just a simple country boy. God put a passion in my heart for big deer, and I just chase it with all I've got. And I fully believe that anyone listening to this could do the same thing that I'm doing if they put their heart and their soul and their passion into it. So I'm hoping that, you know, maybe I can be an inspiration for someone out there, hopefully a lot of people that are chasing their dreams to just stick at it, and you never know when those dreams are going to come true.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Illinois opener, which I believe Illinois came into season on Tuesday of this week. We're sitting here on Sunday right now, and we knew that there was going to be a front and a temperature drop starting on Thursday, and I was able to take a couple vacation days and come up. But let's start with what we kind of discussed on the phone all week, because originally I was even planning on taking the entire Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday and coming up. But let's go through for everybody that's had an October 1st opening day and kind of go through what we've seen and what's going on.
Yeah, the first 2 days of the season, I didn't even hunt. The temperatures were in the 90s, and I don't know. This is my, I think, 42nd year of deer hunting, and I don't know that I have ever hunted in the temperatures in the 90s. Now, I've hunted in the 80s a lot, but it was absolutely a heat wave. So I didn't even hunt the first 2 days of the season. I think one of the things I've learned over the years is you've got to be patient. And you got to be disciplined. It'd be easy to run out there just because it's opening day and you haven't been in a stand for months and jump in one, but most of the time you're doing more harm to your chances than good. So I set out those first 2 days, and then you showed up on the third day, and the front was starting to move through. Temperatures were not quite as brutal, and then they cooled off even more. And I had a target buck on. We hunted on my farm. Just going to come right out and say it. We hunted on my farm. There is a target buck here that I'm hoping to be my early season Booner. He's a 6-year-old buck. He's probably going to score, I'm just going to guess, in the low 170s. You'll know him whenever I post the picture because he's a 5x4 main frame, but on the 5-point side, he's got a flyer off of his G2. And he's got another sticker at his base. So I'm telling you the details now before he's ever killed. But the first evening out, Terry and I saw this buck in a food plot come out about 80 to 100 yards from us. Feed, he just wouldn't come our way. We did see a nice 3-year-old that, hopefully he's going to turn into something special. Had him at 20 to 40 yards for about 15 minutes. Saw those 2 bucks and a handful of does on that first hunt. So the second day, the wind changed a little bit. Terry and I went to a double set stand that I've got in a funnel, and hadn't been there all that long, and I heard a buck rubbing his antlers on a tree in the brush, and this was pretty thick brush where we was sitting. It was about 50 yards or so from where we were at that I could hear this buck in that brush rubbing his antlers. So I thought, if that buck's on his feet and he's probably feeling somewhat aggressive if he's sitting there rubbing his rack, I'll get out my grunt call and see if I can pull him over towards us. And gave a couple of grunts, and sure enough, he comes within about 30, 35 yards of us and just stands there. And I thought sure he was going to come past us because the obvious route to the food plots and feeding areas were right past that stand and through a funnel. But, he stood there for, I don't know, the longest time, and eventually he just walked away. And I almost think maybe that grunt call got his attention, but it also put him on high alert, and he was just afraid to commit all the way. But got a good look at him. I think Terry got a little bit of video footage of him there in the brush. And that was that for that day.
The funny thing is this tree that we're in is absolutely huge. And I'm above Don with the video camera, and there's this, I don't know if it's a sawed-off log or a limb that you had, but he had his Vortex binos sitting there on this it was almost like a shelf of what a big limb used to be hanging out. And the marketing guy in me is like, oh, that's a really, really cool picture. So I'm hanging around the side of the tree above his head trying to get the right angle on these Vortex binos sitting there, and you're like, what in the world are you doing? and it wasn't too long after that we heard that rubbing on that tree. And he was I would guess he was inside 35 yards, don't you?
I would say probably 30 yards, yeah.
So I stayed on him for a while. I had obviously was in manual focus and trying to zoom down in a thicket, so I've not actually even pulled the footage up to see if it was all in good focus, but definitely got some footage of him on the second night. He was the first night when we were in the blind where he came up, we could see him, but I couldn't get the camera arm completely around on him. So I got video footage of the 3-year-old for a while, but Didn't get the fork time buck. But that buck we both have a history with. Last year, we found his. Which side shed did we find last year?
Oh, it was the weaker side. I don't remember which one, but
then the year prior, you found both of them.
The 2 years prior. So
yeah.
I've got 5 antlers off that buck. Of his last 6 antlers, I've got 5 of those 6.
And based on where you found the antler last year, we're pretty sure that the matching set is probably in the bedding grass that we found right beside it. So when we burn that bedding grass, it's probably, hopefully we'll find that in there. But we have a long history with this deer, and we kind of called him the fork time buck because the 2 years prior, his G2s were forked almost like Smokey. It's like a little bit of Smokey genetics that's still in him. Mm-hmm. And then 2 years ago, he only had one forked G2, right?
Yeah, he's always had at least one since he was 3 years old. He's always had at least one forked G2. Last year he had both. I think the 2 years previous he only had one. This year he lost it. Now he hurt his foot real bad in the rut last year. In fact, I think he broke it. Kyle Harmon was here hunting with me from Team Radical, and he got some video footage of this buck. It's going to be really interesting if I get him killed and we tie it all together, on a video. There's some great footage that Kyle got last year where you can see that buck dragging that foot. And I don't know if that injury caused his antlers to grow different this year or what. There's no doubt it's the same deer, but instead of a forked G2, he's got a flyer sticking out off of one G2, probably 6 to 8 inches. So real interesting buck, an old buck. He's 6 years old this year, and I'd love to get him on the ground pretty quick to take care of my early season Booner, and then I can start focusing on the rut and bucks that I can chase then and hopefully get that second one down.
Now, we were both hunting here on your home farm in 2018 during the month of October. Mm-hmm. And that fork buck really, I think he disappeared through most of the month of October. And we think we know where he went, but this year that's the other thing that you got in the back of your mind from year to year patterns is that this deer through the core of October has wandered away a little bit. And I think that's why the message here is you want to get aggressive and you want to kill this deer, but you didn't hunt opening weekend or the 2 opening days because the conditions weren't right. Last night we had a wind out of the south, and there was no way we could even get close to where we thought that deer was at. So we ended up hunting all the way on the other side of the farm, knowing that we probably wouldn't seen him to not push him. So even though you want to make sure you try to get this deer early before he shifts, we still have to be smart about it.
Yeah, that's where discipline comes in when you're chasing mature bucks. I'm confident that I know within a 200-yard circle where that buck's bedding on a daily basis. But with the wind we had, we just couldn't get there without, really risking being busted. And then it becomes a whole lot harder to kill a mature buck. So
I can't tell you how many times you said, check the weather app. And we were really wanting – we could have done it with a true southeast wind. And no matter what the weather app or the weather guy says, it really comes down to your flag out on the pole that you watch as soon as you look out the house. And what was happening is that wind was coming out of the due south, and every once in a while it would turn and blow from the southwest a little bit. And that would have just been horrible for any spot close to that corner.
Right. I've got a windsock here at my house, and I don't fly airplanes or nothing, but it may look like it when somebody drives by. But that weather sock is just for hunting. And, in the day leading up to an afternoon's hunt, I'll watch that weather sock continually to see what the wind's doing, how it's shifting. And it looked, if you just glance up at it and walk away, most of the time yesterday it looked like a south to southeast wind. But then occasionally it would flutter over to the southwest, and that was just absolutely terrible for the stands that we could possibly hunt. But, that's where discipline comes in. I think that's where, a lot of deer hunters fail is that they take a chance, thinking they can get away with it one time, and if I don't see him today, oh, well, I'll come back and hunt, that stand again another time when the weather is or the wind is right. And you can burn out a stand, especially when you're talking about mature bucks, 6-year-old bucks. You don't get too many chances to make mistakes. And, you got to capitalize when the conditions are right, and when they're not, you got to stay away. And that's what we had to do yesterday. But the good news is it looks like the wind is going to be perfect today to get back in one of the good stands and have a chance to kill this buck maybe again.
Yeah, we got a wind out of the northwest today. So, but if we walk out there and that weather sock's blowing the wrong way, we'll change our plan, obviously. So that's what we got going on. I mean, we saw him 2 nights in a row. So hopefully, we have to be aggressive, but we have to be smart and try to get this guy on the ground before he shifts if he does what he did last year. So one of the other ideas you've had that we talked about is you wrote an article, and I'm not even sure which magazine it was in years ago, it was called Profiling Big Buck Serial Killers, meaning the hunters that were going out. And what traits do the guys who consistently put monster bucks on the ground, what do they have in common? And we think it'd be a really cool thing every week to just touch on this for a couple minutes, because you did a lot of research for this article, and it might let each of us learn a little bit about the guys that are consistently doing it. What are the things they got in common? So this week, let's pick one of those topics that those guys had that you listed in your article.
Yeah, the article Profiling Big Buck Serial Killers is one of my favorites that I ever wrote. And, I've written, I don't know, probably close to 500 articles for various publications now, but this is one of my favorites because it looked at the guys that are doing it consistently year after year. In the 25 or so years I've been in the hunting industry, and even before that, I've had the opportunity over the last 40 plus years to rub shoulders and have conversations with a lot of big buck serial killers, some of the biggest names in the industry, but also people that you've never heard of, but they've got a wall full of bucks that would make anyone proud. And in this article, I detailed some of the traits that these guys all have in common. And in the next few weeks, we're going to go over those one at a time. And the trait I want to talk about this week is that each one of these big buck serial killers happen to be a loner. I mean, their personality trait was such that they were just loners, almost antisocial, if you will. And I kind of fit the bill myself. I'm one of them guys that I don't need somebody with me every step of the way, everything I do. I could jump in my truck and drive to California by myself and never even turn the radio on. My mind's always working, so I don't need to be entertained. I don't need company. When I go to the deer woods, honestly, I'd prefer to go by myself without a camera, without
Thanks
a camera.
Thanks a
lot. Don't take it personal. But I like sharing it with friends too. But if I had my choice, I would go by myself. And it's ironic that just yesterday I was seeing on social media, somebody made a post. There was a young man that had shot a doe, his first deer. Beautiful picture.
I saw this.
Yeah, and it said, this is what it's all about. And I fully understand that, but I think what people miss is that what deer hunting is all about is different for different people.
Yep.
What it is, and I get it, for a lot of people it's the social aspect. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I like spending time with friends too. It's just that the majority of my time I'd just as soon be alone out by myself doing something. And all these big buck serial killers seem to have that same trait. They're loners. You don't see these guys going to the woods with their buddies and things like that. They're fine with being alone. They're fine with being away from civilization and society and just off on their own. And, I don't understand how that ties into killing big bucks consistently. I mean, I think a part of it is a hunter out by himself is leaving, less scent than if he's got a friend along, less noise. If you take a friend along, well, then you need 2 stands for every good wind direction, or 2 good stands for any possible wind direction. There's just a whole lot of negatives that work against you when you take someone with you. And again, I'm not telling anyone that if you want to kill big bucks, you got to leave your buddies at home. What you really need to do is just decide, what you want to get out of deer hunting. For me, it's the challenge. It's the challenge of matching wits with one of the smartest big game animals out there. A buck that's lived several years right underneath the nose of humans that don't even know he exists. if you can slip in and kill that deer without him with a bow, and he doesn't even know you're around, you've really accomplished something. And if you can do it consistently, as far as I'm concerned, that is the ultimate in hunting. And I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way. Again, if you want to take your buddy hunting or your kids or whatever, by all means, do whatever makes you happy. But the big buck serial killers, one trait that they have is they are all loners.
Well, I think it goes a little bit further than that. And the guys that are doing what you do, which there's very few of those, they don't have time to do any of the social aspects of it. There is not many people that's busier than you are. And it is constantly, every time I'm talking to you, well, I'm going over here to check whether the crops are out on this field because that might change how I hunt it in November. Your mind is always working on crop rotations, pressure, new properties, everywhere along the line. You're always doing something every day of the year to try to chase these animals, and you really don't have time for the social aspect of life. You're very dedicated to your family, to your church, but outside of that, it's deer hunting. And I think that's a big tie-in together with the other people that you researched with this article.
Yeah, deer hunting is my only interest, outside of God and my family. So I just wish, I get slammed every once in a while by the haters on social media or whatever, and I just wish some of them people had the slightest inkling of how much time and effort I put in, even for each buck that I kill, the amount of time in the woods, just scheming and thinking about it, and what do I need to do different, and even the money I put, towards chasing these animals. It's just, for the average deer hunter, they can't even comprehend it. And a lot of it comes down to my personality, being a loner. I just, that's what drives me. And I'm not, being a loner is how God made me. I'm not complaining or anything like that. It's just, and I'm not bragging either. It's just the way I am. But it really ties in to these guys that are killing these big bucks year after year after year. And I'm not just talking 3-year-old 150-inch deer. I'm talking the true giants. These guys are socially or almost antisocial.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of these traits, too, that you researched in the article. So the next episode will bring you another trait and touch on that for a little bit. Yep. But let's move on to the BuyAFarm.com property of the week, as Don's going to tell you about that.
BuyAFarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
This week's Buy a Farm featured property is a 166-acre tract in Cumberland County, Illinois. This tract includes 85 acres that is tillable, 22.7 acres enrolled in the CRP program, and approximately 60 wooded acres. The annual income on this property right now is over $20,000. The tillable acreage is bringing in between $15,000 to $17,000, depending on the harvest that year. The CRP acreage is bringing in $5,400 annually. One great thing about this property, I've actually walked this property twice, been on it 2 different times. It's got a world of potential. This 85 tillable acres could all be enrolled in the CRP program. And the way it lays out, when I look at a property, I come up with an idea in my head, what I would do if I owned that property. And when I pulled onto this property for the first time, it was like a no-brainer. Here's what needs to be done here. But, a guy could be shooting good bucks here pretty quick. Another great thing about this property is that I did the work of looking at the border. That's one of the major things you want to look at when you're looking at a potential hunting property is what's the neighboring properties like? Are you going to have people sitting on your fence taking advantage of your hard work? Well, 77% of the entire border of this property has some major obstruction. There's a railroad on one side. There's a major creek on one side. You got roads and such. So the pressure you're going to have on neighboring properties is going to be very limited. There's also the potential to expand this property. Buy a Farm has several other listings in the immediate area, and even the property that borders this one may be able to be accessed through a lease or a purchase. This is a brand new listing. It's probably not even on the Buy a Farm website yet, depending on how quick you listen to this podcast, but it will be soon if it's not. To find out more about it, call Todd Hewing, Buy a Farm broker. His phone number is 217-663-8087, and Todd can show you that property. But I'm telling you what, right now it's over $20,000 in income on the place, with the potential to sign it up for CRP and turn it in. And you could kill big deer there right now, keep that income, but you can make it even better by putting that tillable acres into CRP and designing it in such a way to funnel a lot more deer, to feed a lot more deer through some bigger plots and such. But give Todd a call at 217-663-8087, and he'd be glad to show you that property.
Yeah, Cumberland County's actually a very, very good county. It's a great area. But since our demographic goes out of central Illinois, for the out-of-state hunters, and the Illinois residents don't like to hear this, but those guys that are paying that big money coming into out-of-state and paying huge amounts of money per acre to lease property, when you actually do the math and you can get this much income off of a piece of property, you're probably out of pocket less buying a piece of property, taking the income off it, letting that pay for your hunting property instead of paying a lease and that money just being gone for hunting rights. Then it's yours and you can do what you want with it.
Yeah, and when you buy a property, you know you're adding equity. You're gaining equity because it's not just, I lease property, but a lease really is throwing money away. At the end of the year, what do you got?
It's a trespass fee is all it is.
Exactly. This is a beautiful property with a world of potential, and you don't find too many that's got this kind of income.
Yeah, so for you out-of-state hunters, we're going to give you Todd Hewing's number one more time. Give him a call if you're looking to get an out-of-state lease, and this might be, with this level of income, this might be a great opportunity to lock up a really good piece of hunting ground and it be yours and not just the ability to hunt. So Todd Hewing, 217-663-8087, and it will be up on the buyafarm.com website probably within a couple days. So let's move on to some listener-submitted questions. And like I said, we got more than what we'll ever be able to do. We're going to kind of pick and choose a couple here. But let's start with the first one you got there, Don. Why don't you jump into that one?
Okay, the first question comes from Brad Wendy. And Brad wants to know, what are some of the tips to keep in mind as I get my 8-year-old son started hunting this year? I really want to make it a year he will remember and light the same fire in him that I've had for so many years. Well, that's a great question, Brad, because, my personal opinion is that a lot of people get their kids into hunting too soon and the wrong way. They'll take a young kid that's, I'm not even going to mention the age, but a very young kid. They'll set him up deer hunting, put him in a blind, and the kid looks out the blind and he shoots a big deer, and has really no understanding or comprehension of what he just did. And I don't mean in the size of the deer he killed, but I mean also in the taking of an animal's life. I would much rather see these youngsters start out small game hunting, take them squirrel hunting, let them get started on small game and work up to deer hunting. So not only do they appreciate it, but they understand what they're doing. But the other thing is, don't push them. There's some kids that are not going to have, a lot of kids actually, that are not going to have the same interest as their parents. And the best way or the fastest way for them to lose interest is to be pushed into something they're really not interested in. So kind of, keep it fun for the kids, but build that interest slowly. Don't think you got to take your kid out and he has to shoot a giant buck the first year in the woods. Build up to that. And also it's important that they appreciate more than just the deer kill. That time in the woods, seeing the sunrise, the other animals that you're going to see while you're sitting in the tree, spending time with friends and family and such, and even the ride back and forth to the hunting area. I still remember as a kid my dad taking me, and deer hunting, and we'd ride a half hour, whatever it took to get to the hunting area, and some of those conversations and such. So just make it fun and don't push them.
Yeah. Today, we didn't even talk about this, but when I woke up early this morning, I looked at my Facebook account. Today's the anniversary 7 years ago of my daughter Kaylin's first deer.
Really?
And two things. I have 3 kids. 2 of them like to hunt. I have one daughter that wants nothing to do with it, and that's okay. I don't force her into it. But I've seen a lot of serious trophy hunters that bring their kids in. Number one, they don't appreciate the process of it. They let them go in and hunting out of a blind, hunting with different weapons that different state allows them to hunt younger. That's all fine and good. But one thing that I did that I think my kids appreciate is that they saw the whole process. So even my daughter that does not hunt, she's still going out. When we put the first box blind up on the property, she was out there helping us. They've helped me put in food plots. They've helped me, everything on the farm that leads up to it, they're part of the process. So they understand what it takes. And it doesn't matter if it's a spike or, a big buck. They understand it's not just going out and killing. I think showing that appreciation and understanding. We have a mutual friend in Kentucky that his little boy has already shot 1 or 2 bucks. But every kid's different. This kid is completely ate up with it. He can guess a score and an age. He's looking at trail camera pictures and trying to. So every kid's different. So there's not a rule of thumb, I think, that goes with this. But don't put the pressure of a young hunter, whether they're a kid or whether they're your wife that you're just trying to get out there, that they have to go out there and kill a 6-year-old either.
Right.
Let them understand the process of what they're doing and appreciate it, and let them have fun. You can't get into this and be at the Don Higgins stage where you're holding out, trying to shoot world-class whitetail out of the gate. So I think there has to be a balance of it. I really like the question that Sam Heller submitted, and it says, how do you share a property you had access to for years with someone who just got granted permission prior to bow season? And the reason I like this question is we had almost a very similar experience to this week when we called and actually asked permission to hunt somewhere.
Yeah, Terry and I were looking at a property in an area an hour or so from my house, and it just so happened that we were close to a property who I knew the owner, and so I gave him a call to see, and I knew he didn't hunt. To give him a call to see if anyone had hunted that property. I'd actually hunted it years in the past, years ago. He told me that there was already someone there, but he said, it's 160 acres. There's no reason why you can't both be there. And why don't you just talk to him and work something out? And I told the guy, I said, no, if someone's already there, I'm not going to step on their toes. I think the big thing that hunters need to do is treat the other guy the way you want to be treated.
That's right.
I've walked away from a lot of properties because somebody was there. I've had people walk in on me knowing I was there. In fact, it's gotten to the point where I almost have to have my wife drop me off a lot of places just because if my truck is seen somewhere, everybody thinks, well, there's a big buck there because Don's truck's there. They're doing everything they can. They're using every angle to get onto that property. And there's going to be some haters who are going to say, well, Don did this and Don did that. He leased a property that I was hunting. Yeah, there's been situations where I've talked to a landowner and he says, I've got so many people hunting here, it's like a circus. There's people coming and going. I'm going to have to get a handle on it somehow. And at that point, I may offer to lease it from him. And, it's not my fault that a bunch of guys went in and ran over the guy's property with no respect. I'll show up and not only show the guy respect, but pay him if I need to. I think it really just all comes down to, like I said, you treat the other people the way you want to be treated. And if someone's there before you, but you've been granted permission, the very least you should do is talk to the other guy. But, I've seen too many situations and been involved in too many where I've had permission on a property for years, just like Sam's explaining here, and somebody gets permission and they don't even care where your tree stands at. 20 yards away, they're putting up theirs. So treat people the way you want to be treated.
Yeah, and as far as Sam's question goes, it might not be what he wants to hear, but if he can't get on the same page with this guy, he needs to move on and find another piece, as bad as that sounds.
I've done that a lot. I've had to leave a property that I've had permission for years because somebody comes in and ruins it.
Yeah, so, when if you're just a meat hunter and that's your goal, you have a better chance of working this out. But
right.
if you're chasing what we're trying to do, people don't understand. You just getting dressed outside your truck and accessing your stand with the wrong wind direction, you just blew that property and going to make it really, really tough to kill anything on the hit list. So, Sam, I feel for you, buddy. It's happened to both of us. Hopefully you can get on the same page with whoever this other guy is, and I wouldn't hesitate and start going out looking for a new piece to diversify a little bit. So you got one more? We got time for one more, Don, if you want to go with one more.
Well, we got some to choose from here. Let's go with Chris Andrews. Chris has questions regarding public land. One, how do you go about locating the deer you want to hunt? He's got several questions here about this, so I'm just going to read them off one at a time and answer them one at a time. How do you go about locating a deer you want to hunt? I think I mentioned earlier that I was on 4 different tracts of public land this week looking for a deer I want to hunt. What I do is I go by intel. People talk. And I've got a handful of really good, trusted friends that when they hear something or they see something with their own eyes, I trust them. And I investigate a lot of rumors that I hear, and a lot of them don't pan out. I hear somebody's seen a giant buck here, there, wherever. I'm out there with a handful of trail cameras, hanging them, trying to get a picture and seeing. And most of the time, the buck is not what it was described to be, but occasionally. So I'm starting with intel from people talking. And then I'll take that to the next level with trail cameras. And I'm telling you, I've had more trail cameras stolen on public land than I have on private by a long shot. And 90% of my cameras are on private, but 90% of them that get stolen are off of public. So I understand that challenge as well. But that's how I'm finding these bucks to hunt. Number 2, what do you see are the major obstacles for public or on public land for you to get over to be successful? Without a doubt, it's 2 things. One, it's the people. You just got to get away from the people. That's what a mature buck's going to do. He wants to be away from the people too. So you got to do the same thing. The other thing is that deer on public land do not have as tight a patterns per se as they do on less pressured ground.
That's interesting.
You're not going to see a buck on public land do something 3 days in a row, right, or very, very seldom. You may in the summertime when he's on that in velvet, and you may in the late season when food sources are very limited. But most of the time, during the rut, whatever, you're not going to see a deer following a pattern, a mature buck following a pattern on public land. He just won't survive. If he does, he'll never make it to maturity. So those are probably the big obstacles. The people and the bucks are just not near as patternable. Next question, will you be more mobile than you are when hunting private land? Absolutely. There's no way I'm going to be on public ground. The stands that I would hang on public ground, I would just not have as much faith in as I would on private ground. Now, I may know I'm in the right spot, but I'm not going to sit there for a week in the right spot waiting for that buck to show like I would on private land. If I know I'm on the right spot in private land, I know that buck's coming through sooner or later. It's just a right matter of being there when he is. Same thing on public, but he's so much more evasive and unpredictable in his patterns that I will be a whole lot more mobile, because if something don't work after 2 or 3 hunts, I'm moving on. The last question, how to deal with pressure from others. I'm just like everybody else. I'm looking for that little pocket of cover or whatever that other hunters are ignoring. Sometimes it's off the beaten path. You may have to take a boat in or something like that. Other times it's a real obvious spot right next to a parking lot that everybody walks by. But deal with pressure from others. I just get away from others the best I can, the same as a mature buck would.
Yeah, goes back to these bucks are going. There's a reason they're still alive at the age that you're wanting to kill them, and they're going where there is no human intrusion. So either they're nocturnal or they're going somewhere that nobody else is at. Find that spot.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So let's talk about this coming week. We got a hunt tonight, and then I'm heading back to Kentucky. I got to be at work in the morning. It's going to be youth rifle season in Kentucky next week, so I'm heading back to take my son hunting, and probably won't be back to Illinois for, I'm guessing, a week or two. So tell us what you got going on here this week, Don.
Well, we've got the favorable wind this afternoon for me to hunt this buck on my home farm, and it's supposed to be favorable tomorrow as well. So after you leave, Terry, I've rounded up another cameraman for tomorrow. We'll be after him, and then on Tuesday, I've got one of my sponsors, Mark Fisher, the owner of 360 Hunting Blinds, is coming in from Pennsylvania to spend 3 or 4 days hunting with me. Hopefully we can get Mark a nice buck. But the midweek, it's supposed to warm up a little bit. The winds are going to be a little poorer, so I'm probably not going to be after the buck here on my place and have Mark here hunting with me as well. But towards the end of the week, we've got some rain in the forecast, which I hope we get. And that'll change the wind directions. And if I haven't killed the Booner on my place for the early season Booner, I'll be back after him. Hopefully that's out of the way. Hopefully I've killed or Mark has killed a buck, and I'm looking forward to the rut and doing a lot of recon. I've got a new property that I'm going to be hanging some stands on this week, and I've got some cameras already there that I'm going to be checking. And keeping an eye on the crop harvest there, which is going to be real critical. There's some stands that I've already got on that property that require, at this point, would require me to walk 3/4 of a mile through standing corn, and I just don't feel at this part of the season that it's probably worth it. I'd probably spook a whole lot more deer than I would ever have a chance to shoot. So I'm kind of biding my time there, but I'm getting that property ready so that during the rut, I can hit it hard and have a chance to maybe tag a Booner there as well.
Yeah, so hopefully by our next episode, and we've kind of made a decision based off of feedback, we're going to, at least during hunting season, try to do this every week to 10 days instead of every 2 weeks, because the information that Don sees and the intel that we're getting from the woods, we want to share that with you as quickly as possible. But hopefully by the next time we come on, I can talk a little bit about Jonathan going after a buck we call T2, and then Don having hopefully his first Booner, and maybe one of our sponsors getting a buck down. But before we leave, real quick, this is really important, and I think it's something that, especially the people in the Midwest. Now we get to our listeners that are down south or farther east, don't have to really watch about. But the standing crops right now are changing strategies of what you're doing and how you're laying this out. And I can't tell you how many miles we've driven in the last 3 days just looking at standing crops and seeing what's coming out, what's still green, because we can drive by a cornfield, even though it's been hot and the wind's blowing. We can tell where they're going to probably be picking next and where it's going to be a few more weeks. How does standing crops, when you're driving around looking at your properties, affect not only where these deer are at, but how you're hunting it?
Well, Terry, I live in an area that's large agricultural fields and smaller woodlots. So during the part of the year when those crops are up, the deer are utilizing those crops as cover as well as food. So, as those crops come out, that pushes the deer into those small woodlots and such where I'm hunting. This year is very unique in that the crops are about 30 days behind what would be normal. So there's a lot more standing crops right now than there typically is this time of the year. So what I'm looking at is areas where I know there's been mature bucks in the past. Are the crops in that area starting to come out? And particularly cornfields, but it's also for accessing stands. There's stands that I would like to hunt right now, but I don't care to walk through standing corn for a half a mile or whatever to get to them, just for the fact that I'll spook a whole lot more deer. Not that I would make a tough journey or tough trek to a stand as an excuse for not hunting it, but it's the damage you do getting there. Access is everything to us for a good stand, and you can, if you don't have good access, you don't have a good stand. And if you've got standing crops, a lot of times that takes away your good access. One more thing I'll throw out is that the deer Terry and I have been seeing in the evenings on our hunts, these deer are on green food sources right now. I forgot to mention that earlier, but if you've got green food sources, we was over a deadly dozen plot the other evening, a real world deadly dozen plot, when we seen the Booner come out, and he fed in that for probably a good half hour that we watched him. Just didn't come our way. And then the nice 3-year-old that could turn into something potentially down the road, he was out in that deadly dozen plot, as well as probably 10 or 12 does.
And when we saw the fork tine buck 2 nights ago, he was heading that way.
Exactly. And then all the does that we could see from that stand that were in that alfalfa patch, they're on the greens right now. I know there's a good acorn crop as well, persimmons. About as good a persimmon crop as I've ever seen, so the deer into that. Last night, Terry and I were hunting over a small orchard that had pears and apples and such, and we seen a number of does and fawns in that. So I'd be focusing on the green crops if you've got them in your area, alfalfa, or if you've got food plots that are green, focus on that. And then that's probably not going to change until we get a hard frost. So I would stick with them green plots for a while.
Yeah, and the other thing is drive around, or if you're out of state, make some calls. Find out where these farmers are planting winter wheat. We saw at least 3 or 4 different farmers planting winter wheat in cut bean fields, and that's going to play a factor into your late season. And if you know that's going to be there, now's the time to go ahead and slip in there and hang you a lone wolf set for that late season hunt. And we've been talking about this because on one of the properties that we saw that they were planting winter wheat, they haven't done that before, and that might be completely change how the deer that you've watched on that farm react in late season.
That is a great tip, Terry. I'm glad you brought that up, because we did see 3 or 4 different farmers planting winter wheat in the last 2 days, and one of those, I'm going to have a stand right on the corner of a woodlot that butts up to that winter wheat field, and I'm getting it in now. See, I'm not going to wait until that winter wheat comes up and is green and the deer are hitting it. I'm going to get that stand in this week before that wheat ever sprouts, and it's a stand I'm not planning on hunting till the late season, or at least probably mid-November. But I'm going to get that stand ready now and get out, so my scent's gone and everything else. So plan ahead when you see an opportunity like that. Don't wait for the deer to start hitting it and then take advantage. Jump in now and get ready.
Yeah. So that wraps it up for this weekend. This episode, Don, do you got any closing comments here before we sign off and get ready to go back out and hopefully kill a Booner tonight?
Well, that's the plan, and I hope that all the listeners are successful as well. I just, want to express my appreciation to everyone for making this thing take off as well as it has. I didn't know what to expect. I thought it would build to be something good. We want it to be the best whitetail hunting podcast out there, and that's going to take your support. So I hope you'll tune in and, tell your friends to tune in. And like Terry said, during hunting season especially, we're going to make these more frequent so that hopefully we can help some of you guys tag the buck of your dreams.
Yeah, so you want to make sure you're following Higgins Outdoors on Instagram and Facebook, and Terry Peer on Instagram and Facebook, but submit those questions on higginsoutdoors.com, and there's also blogs. So when Don's talking about this fork tine buck that we're going after, that's where he's really posting the blogs that kind of tie along with the subject matter that we're in there. So make sure you're going over to higginsoutdoors.com. You can also buy his books and look at his land consulting projects, because the things that he's doing about his hunting property, he can actually come and help you with that on yours also. So for this week, we want to thank our sponsors, Quiet Cat Bike, Graconics Trail Cameras, Real World Wildlife Products, Lone Wolf Tree Stands. Might I add, the Lone Wolf Tree Stands, not the imitation Lone Wolf, but Lone Wolf Tree Stands, Matthews Archery, and 360 Hunting Blinds, and Vortex Optics. We hope everybody has a great week and good luck, and we'll be back on episode 3 within about a week. Take care.